Don't come to my wedding. Watch it on Livestream. Okay, my sister emailed, so I canceled the wedding. That line didn't just sting. It cracked something open. No phone call, no invitation, just a one-line email with a Livestream link, like I was an old coworker, not the woman who paid for the damn venue. I sat in my home office reading it twice, thinking maybe I missed a paragraph. Maybe there was a follow-up she forgot to send, something that would explain why my little sister thought it was acceptable to cut me out with the click of a mouse. But there wasn't. That was it. Hey, Janet, we've made some last-minute seating changes due to capacity constraints. Please tune in via live stream. Hope you understand. Like I was the problem. Like excluding me from the day I'd spent 6 months planning and funding was a minor logistical error I should simply accept with grace. I'm Janet Jackson. No, not the one you're thinking of. Just a 42-year-old financial analyst who's been bailing out my family with spreadsheets and savings accounts since I was 24. I live in a modest brick home in East Atlanta, the kind with creaky floorboards and good bones, the kind you fix piece by piece, because walking away from things has never been my strong suit. I bought this place 6 years ago after getting promoted to VP at a boutique finance firm. I was proud of that, not because of the title, but because it meant I'd finally given myself permission to live for me, not just manage everyone else's disasters. But the truth is, I never stopped managing, especially when it came to Lauren's. Lauren's my younger sister by 7 years. She's a freelance brand strategist with an Instagram full of staged brunches, curated affirmations, and ambient photos of her desk with captions like, "Trust the timing." Growing up, I was the planner, the one who packed the lunches and paid the bills, while Mom floated between part-time jobs and late-night breakdowns. Dad left before Lauren turned 2, so I became the fallback parent before I even finished high school. Maybe that's why, when Lauren got engaged to Marshall last December, I offered to help. I didn't even hesitate. She called me crying about how stressed she was, how she didn't want a cheap backyard wedding, how Marshall's family expected something classy, and I said, "Tell me what you need." I always do. By the end of February, I had wired over $1,000 to venues, vendors, and stylists. By March, it was closer to $1,000. I told myself it was okay. I told myself she deserved a beautiful day, especially after everything she'd been through. The part I didn't say out loud was that I hoped maybe, finally, it would bring us closer. Maybe she'd see me, not as a backup plan or a financial cushion, but as someone who showed up when it counted. For a while, I believed it was working. She added me to the vendor calls. She asked my opinion on linens and lighting. She even introduced me as the investor behind the scenes, like we were partners in some heartfelt production. But slowly, the emails stopped copying me. The group chat shifted. The gratitude thinned. My name was missing from the thank you speech draft she showed our mom. I told myself not to make it a big deal. But when I found out they'd printed the programs and left me out entirely, not even a nod under contributors, something in my chest turned sharp and stayed that way. I tried talking to her. I really did. I asked her gently if she was feeling overwhelmed, if she needed more space, if I had done something to make her feel uncomfortable. She said, "You always make things about you." That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard her voice since. Just that email, just that sentence. The part that haunts me isn't the exclusion. It's how routine it felt, how easily she wrote me off, like cutting me out was just another step in her timeline, like pressing send on an update email. And maybe the scariest part is how quiet I was when I read it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even reply. I just sat there, phone on one side, open laptop on the other, wedding expenses still blinking in an Excel sheet I'd been refining for months. The numbers were precise. Each line item traced back to my name. The balance due next week, $37, $850, scheduled to transfer from my account at 9 a.m. Monday morning. I didn't delete the email. I didn't call my mom. I didn't text my sister. I closed the laptop, stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and for the first time in years, I let the silence sit there between me and my thoughts, not loud, not angry, because I knew something I hadn't let myself admit until that moment. I didn't ruin this wedding, but I might be done paying for my own erasure. I didn't do anything dramatic that night. No angry text, no call to my mother demanding answers. I didn't cancel the wedding or pull the plug on anything. What I did do was open my old brown file box, the one I kept in the bottom drawer of my office cabinet. It held all the receipts, every floral mock-up, deposit invoice, decorator contract, seating chart, and bakery order. I'd been quietly managing since January. They were organized alphabetically, color-coded, and clipped with notations in the corner. I wasn't trying to control the wedding. I was trying to keep it from falling apart, like I always did. I flipped through each folder slowly, not to check for errors, but to remember how far I had leaned into the background, thinking it would somehow make me more visible. There was a printed email from Tessa, the wedding planner, dated April 12th. She'd thanked me for confirming the second payment and said, "I'll circle back once Lauren approves the final linens." I read it twice. Lauren hadn't mentioned that to me. Then another note from the decorator, requesting approval on the monogrammed photo wall. My signature was at the bottom of the authorization form. Not Lauren's, not Marshall's, mine. Still, they were calling it her vision, her day. I kept finding little moments like that, places where I had filled in the gaps, signed the lines, followed up on delays, all while pretending I was just the silent partner. I'd told myself I was being supportive, generous even, but looking at it now, the pattern was clear. I wasn't invisible. I was useful, and that was worse. By the next morning, I'd already decided I wasn't transferring another cent, not out of anger, out of clarity. I opened the bank portal on my desktop and moved the scheduled $37,850 into a pending file instead. It was still there, technically, but frozen. A soft pause while I gathered myself. Later that afternoon, I met Noelle for coffee. She was one of the few people in my life who didn't need a full preamble, just sat across from me, watching me stir my drink like I was trying to dissolve something thicker than sugar. I didn't even have to bring it up. She asked, "So, the wedding, you okay?" And that was enough. I told her about the email. I told her about the programs, the live stream, the way Lauren hadn't said thank you in weeks. I told her about the line that kept echoing in my head. "You always make things about you." Noelle didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to validate me either. She just listened. That's how I knew what she said next was honest. "You know she's been using you, right? Not just for money, for space, for silence, because you never push back." I took a breath, letting her words settle. Then she added, "Janet, she's not afraid to lose you, because she assumes you'll always stay." It wasn't said with cruelty. It was said like fact, like something that had been obvious for too long. I nodded slowly and looked out the cafe window. A delivery van pulled up across the street, unloading crates of wine for a local restaurant. The driver grunted as he moved box after box with focus. I envied that clarity, that direction. All I had were folders full of evidence that I'd been willingly erased, and I didn't tell Noelle about the money. I didn't tell her I'd already pulled the transfer. I wanted to sit with that decision a little longer, in private. That night, around 11 p.m., I got a text from Tessa. It said, "Quick check-in. Lauren mentioned you might be tied up. Can you confirm final florist payment by Friday morning latest? Let me know if you need the invoice resent." I stared at the message for a minute, then typed, "Received." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just let it float there, like a glass left half full on a counter no one bothered to clear. At that point, I was still debating whether to say anything, whether to call Lauren and confront her directly, or just vanish, not from her life entirely, just from the part where I let her define my value through convenience. But that question answered itself the next morning when I saw her newest post on Instagram. It was a video clip, Marshall giving her a pair of diamond earrings. The caption reading, "To the woman who makes every moment magic, I love doing life with you." In the background, on the kitchen counter, was the velvet case I had picked up and delivered. My hand could be seen placing it down, just for a second. I wasn't angry. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it plainly, "Contingency," Inside, I moved every wedding document I had. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an audience. I needed the quiet strength of someone who had finally stopped asking to be noticed. That's where things started to shift. Not loud, not sudden, but permanent. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at the Peachtree Grand, a restored ballroom venue Lauren had insisted on after seeing it in a wedding blog. I hadn't RSVP'd. No one asked if I would be there, but I had confirmed the payment on the catering deposit back in May. At this point, I figured showing up quietly was the closest thing to reclaiming my own presence. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed simply in a navy blue sheath dress, pearl earrings, and nude flats. Polished, but neutral, not enough to draw attention, not enough to be accused of trying. The valet took my car without speaking. I walked in behind a small group of guests holding gift bags and laughing like nothing in the world could go wrong that night. At the entrance stood a framed sign on an easel with golden script, "Welcome to Lauren and Marshall's rehearsal celebration." Below it, a small placard with acknowledgments, with love and gratitude to Marshall's parents, close family, and the dream planning team. That was the name of Tessa's business. There was no mention of me, not even a subtle nod. I read the line twice, then stepped aside and pretended to check my earring as Sabine, one of Tessa's assistants, approached. She smiled wide, clipboard in hand, and said, "Everything looks incredible tonight. You really made this happen." I gave a half smile. "Glad it came together," I said. She nodded and disappeared into the room, already being summoned by a server asking about hors d'oeuvres. I found my place card at a back table near the hallway that led to the restrooms. Table 11, tucked beside the door, where staff carts clinked by every few minutes. My seatmate was a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, and a woman I didn't recognize who leaned over and whispered, "You're Lauren's sister." "Right. I thought you might be with the floral team." I nodded without correcting her. Across the room, Lauren was bathed in amber light, dressed in a champagne-colored slip dress that caught the glow just right. She smiled beside Marshall, posed with a practiced tilt of the head as the photographer clicked away. I watched her raise a glass and gesture toward their friends with practiced warmth. I wasn't in the shot, not even near it. I sipped my sparkling water and unfolded my napkin, resting it on my lap as the salad plates were served, and I ate slowly, chewing with intention, not because I was hungry, but because it gave me something to do, while my mind traced the edges of the moment. The irony was sharp. I had helped design this layout. I knew exactly where the restrooms were positioned. I knew how many people the ballroom seated, and how much extra it had cost to rent the specialty lighting she insisted on. And yet, here I sat, arranged like a decorative afterthought, not in conflict, not in crisis, just quietly removed. I left early, tapped the cousin's shoulder, offered a polite smile, and said I wasn't feeling well. She nodded absently, already checking her phone. No one tried to stop me. No one noticed. I stepped outside, accepted my keys from the valet, and got into the car without a word. The drive home was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I parked in the garage, turned off the engine, and sat for a while with both hands on the steering wheel like I was still waiting for direction. That's when the message came. It was from Noelle, just a simple line. "I need to tell you something. Can we meet?" We ended up at the cafe we always went to after bad dates or hard Mondays. She looked nervous, which wasn't like her. She stirred her drink 3 times before speaking. I wasn't going to say anything. She began, but I helped Lauren with the seating chart last week. She was venting, overwhelmed, and I offered to take a look. I nodded, not entirely sure where this was going. Then Noelle said, at one point, she laughed and said, "As long as my sister keeps paying, we're golden." My eyes stayed on the rim of my glass. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, her exact words. Noelle nodded. "I wish they weren't." I didn't blame her. I didn't even feel betrayed. What I felt was an unshakable confirmation of what I already knew. I wasn't her sister in this process. I was a transaction, a silent investor, a credit line in kitten heels. Noelle said something else, something about not letting it eat at me, but I barely heard it. My mind was already somewhere else. Back at home, I opened my laptop again. I clicked open the wedding vendor folder and began moving files into my contingency archive, not out of pettiness, out of necessity, because now it wasn't just about money, it was about memory, and I wasn't going to keep funding a narrative where I didn't exist. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I set an alarm, but because my body had grown tired of pretending to rest. I moved quietly through the house, like a guest trying not to wake the host. The air was still, the kind of stillness that makes you notice every creak in the floor and hum in the walls. I boiled water for tea, not because I craved it, but because the routine gave my hands something to do. I didn't check my phone. I didn't open my email. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the steam rising from the mug and letting the silence thicken. Then I stood up, walked to the back room, and powered on my computer. The wedding finance dashboard was still open from 2 nights ago. The pending transfer sat at the top of the screen, bold and blinking. $37, $850. The balance that would finalize everything. The florist, the string quartet, the favors that had been ordered in bulk and stamped with Marshall and Lauren's initials. I hovered the cursor over the cancel button, not because I was unsure, but because this was the first decision I was making entirely for me. I clicked it. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this transfer? This action cannot be undone. I didn't hesitate. I clicked yes. There was no dramatic music, no rush of adrenaline, no instant sense of victory, only the quiet knowledge that something had shifted. I sat back, folded my hands in my lap, and let the room return to stillness. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't sabotaging a wedding. I was reclaiming the boundary they'd crossed without asking. They hadn't just excluded me. They had built an entire event on my back, and then told me I didn't belong in the photos. That wasn't oversight. That was intent. Later that day, I drove to the bank and met with Carlos, the branch manager who had helped me restructure my accounts last year. I handed him a neatly organized folder with printed copies of every wedding contract I had signed or financed. I didn't speak much, just said, I'd like to formally cancel any outstanding vendor payments associated with these. He nodded slowly, leafing through the documents with a quiet kind of care. There will be late fees for a few of them, he said gently. I understand, I replied. Then he looked up and said something that stayed with me. You look different today, Miss Jackson. Calmer, I think. I gave a faint smile. I feel different. That was all I offered. He nodded and began the paperwork, and I didn't notify the vendors myself. I figured they'd figure it out. Most of them had my name on file, not Lauren's. That had always been the problem. I was the name on the bill, but never on the banner. I didn't go home right away. I parked outside a bakery downtown and sat on a bench in the sun. I watched strangers walk by, mothers pushing strollers, teenagers sharing headphones, a man delivering flowers to a woman who looked both surprised and tired. I let the world move without me for once. I wasn't racing to catch up. I wasn't keeping anything afloat. I just sat there, letting the sun warm my knees through my slacks and wondering how long it had been since I'd done something without calculating who would benefit from it first. That night, around 10, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my cousin Ayla. Hey, just a heads up. Everyone's on Zoom. They want to talk. Might be good to clear the air. I stared at the screen for a moment, then tapped the link without responding. The screen filled with familiar faces. My mother was already mid-sentence, her voice sharp and breathless, like she'd been holding this in all day. Janet, we just want to understand. You've always been the one we could rely on. And this just doesn't feel like you. Uncle Dennis added, it's not about you. It's about family, about Lauren's big moment. Then Marshall chimed in, his tone measured and flat. You didn't just walk away. You took away the structure the whole event relied on. I let them talk. I didn't interrupt. Then, when they finally fell quiet, I unmuted my mic. Let's be clear. I didn't cancel the wedding. I canceled my funding. You canceled me the moment you told me to watch it like a distant acquaintance. My mother gasped. Lauren's face tightened. That's not fair, she said. You're being emotional. I nodded, not to agree, but to acknowledge that she had finally said something honest. I am emotional, I replied. I'm emotional that I signed every check and still didn't make the thank you list. I'm emotional that my presence became an inconvenience the second my usefulness became expected. They didn't have a response. The silence was thick, not with regret, but with exposure. I clicked leave meeting. The screen went black. I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and washed the same mug I'd used that morning. The water was warm, steady. The dish rack clicked lightly as I set it down. That was the moment I knew. I didn't need anyone to validate what I'd done. I didn't need to justify it. I just needed to stop apologizing for noticing how little space I was allowed to take up. And that was not the end. That was the beginning. I didn't turn my phone off that night, but I flipped it face down on the nightstand and let it buzz without looking. They didn't just want answers. They wanted the version of me who always explained her decisions until they made sense to everyone but her, the version who softened every truth, bent every boundary, swallowed every slight in the name of keeping the peace. That version had left the room. What remained was quieter, but far less negotiable. The next morning was unusually still. I moved through the house with a kind of calm that didn't feel forced. I made oatmeal, added blueberries, and ate it slowly at the counter while the early light broke across the windows. I didn't check social media. I didn't call anyone. By the time 11 o'clock arrived, I was already dressed, simple blouse, neutral pants, and my hair pulled back tight. There were errands I could have run, but instead I chose quiet. I folded laundry. I organized old receipts. I refilled the hummingbird feeder in the backyard, and I waited. Around 3:20 p.m., my phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected. Lauren. No subject line, just a single sentence. Can you please talk to me before the ceremony? I stared at the message for a while, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be sure that any response I gave wouldn't be written from the guilt they were used to invoking. I typed nothing. 30 minutes later, the phone rang. I answered without speaking first. She started immediately. Her voice sounded different, strained, like someone who had been crying and trying not to show it. Janet, I know I've messed up. I was overwhelmed. I let people push me into things, and I should have stood up. I should have been better to you. I said nothing. She kept talking. I can fix it. I'll move your seat. I'll make a speech. I'll tell everyone. I just need you to be there. That line caught me, not because it was sincere, but because it revealed what mattered, not the relationship, the optics. There was a long pause. Then I said, as evenly as I could, it's not about the seat, Lauren. It's about how you made sure I wouldn't be in the picture unless I was holding the checkbook. The line went quiet. I could hear voices in the background, someone giving instructions, clinking glassware, a makeup artist saying something about lighting. Then Lauren's voice returned, smaller this time. Please don't ruin this for me. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. I'm not ruining anything, I said quietly. I just stopped funding the illusion. Then I ended the call. That evening, the wedding venue filled with activity, vendors unloading trucks, florists arranging centerpieces, staff prepping wine stations and place settings. Tessa received an envelope addressed directly to her. She opened it, read it once, then again, slower the second time. Her fingers tightened around the page. Within minutes, the entire coordination team paused. Phone calls were made, orders halted, deliveries suspended. Some things had already arrived, but others were held at loading docks, waiting for checks that would never come. Inside the bridal suite, Lauren sat in a silk robe, her hair half-pinned, her lips bare. Her hands trembled slightly as someone held a mirror up. She wasn't looking in it. She was staring at the door. Her mascara hadn't been applied yet. The photographer was waiting. Her planner was pacing. And I was at home, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the wind carry small leaves across the patio. I didn't scroll for updates. I didn't open Instagram. I didn't need to see the aftermath. I had already lived the cause. A text came through about an hour later. No name, just a heart emoji. I deleted it. It didn't sting. It felt weightless, like someone tossing a pebble into a lake, hoping to undo the sinking of a stone. That night, I slept with my windows cracked open and no alarm set. The breeze moved through the house in waves. I dreamed of nothing. The truth is, what hurt most wasn't that they didn't defend me. It's that they expected I wouldn't defend myself. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd stay silent, that I'd pay and sit quietly in the corner and smile for pictures that I was never asked to be in. What they forgot is that quiet people don't always stay quiet. We just wait for the moment when stillness speaks louder than any confrontation. That moment had come, and I wasn't going to apologize for hearing it. I didn't go back to the same life after that weekend, not because everything had burned down. Nothing burned, really. That's what surprised most people. There was no public fallout, no viral argument, no family group chat explosion. It was quieter than that, the kind of quiet that lingers after a door is shut too slowly to echo, the kind where no one says goodbye, because no one believes you're really leaving until you don't come back. I spent most of Sunday in comfortable clothes, folding laundry, and listening to the distant sound of neighbors mowing their lawns. The sky had that color only Atlanta in late summer offers, washed out blue with threads of gold around the edges. I sat on the couch for a while, watching the dust catch light in the window. My phone buzzed again around noon. A message from my mother. I know this has gotten out of hand. Please just come talk, for your sister's sake. There was no mention of what had happened, no acknowledgement of what she had watched unfold on the Zoom call, just the same script I'd heard since I was 17. De-escalate, be the strong one, fix what other people break. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By Monday morning, I had packed a small suitcase and booked a quiet stay in Asheville, North Carolina, just 3 hours north, close enough to drive, far enough to feel like somewhere else. I didn't tell anyone. I left a note on the kitchen counter for my house cleaner and texted Noelle a quick taking a break. I'm fine. She sent back a thumbs up emoji and didn't press. That's what I appreciated most about her. She knew silence didn't always mean danger. Sometimes it meant healing. The drive was smooth. I rolled down the windows for the first half, letting the wind move through the car like it belonged more than I did. I didn't listen to music, just the road. When I arrived, the hotel receptionist smiled and handed me a real key, not a card. You're all set. Breakfast until 10. We've got fresh scones every morning. Her voice was warm, but not invasive. I thanked her and climbed the narrow stairs to my room. It was small but clean, pale walls, a large window, and a balcony that faced a quiet garden. I unpacked slowly, a few outfits, my laptop, a book I'd meant to read for 3 months. I placed them deliberately, as if claiming space in the world again required intention. That evening, I ordered grilled salmon and a glass of white wine to the room. I ate on the balcony while the air softened around me. I watched a couple in their 20s struggle to light a cigarette across the courtyard, laughing in the way people do when they're too young to know how much things can break. I didn't envy them. I didn't want to go back. I just watched them like someone might watch sparrows, lovely, fleeting. When I finished eating, I opened my phone for the first time in hours. A forwarded post sat at the top of my notifications. Noelle had sent it. A screenshot from Lauren's Instagram. It had gone private since Saturday. The caption read, "Sometimes the people closest to you hurt you most, but love always wins, family above all." There was no mention of the canceled venue, no explanation of why guests had been turned away at the door, just a filtered image of her holding a bouquet, smiling faintly. I didn't open the comment thread. I didn't need to. I already knew how the story would be rewritten. Back in Atlanta, the calls stopped after Tuesday. Maybe they thought I needed space. Maybe they thought I was punishing them. But it wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about holding a grudge or making a point. It was about stopping the lie, the one I'd helped build, that if I kept giving, I'd eventually be loved properly, that if I stayed useful, I'd be seen. It had never worked, and now I'd stop pretending it would. And on the 4th morning, I found myself smiling at the front desk clerk without realizing it. A small thing, but real. I took a walk through the neighborhood and noticed a bookstore I hadn't seen before. I bought a journal, not because I needed to write, but because I wanted to mark that I had lived through something worth remembering. That night, I sat on the same balcony where it had all started and watched the lights flicker across the hills. I wasn't thinking of the wedding. I wasn't thinking of who blamed me. I was thinking about how long it takes to recognize that silence can be an answer, and how freeing it is when you let it be enough. I stayed in Asheville for 7 days. No grand revelations, no spiritual rebirth, just time and space, the kind of space where you stop apologizing for taking up room. Each day had its own rhythm, a slow walk in the morning, a coffee from the cafe near the bookstore, reading in the garden while bees hovered lazily over the lavender. It wasn't exciting, but it was real. On the third morning, I caught myself humming. No music, just the low, unthinking hum of someone whose body had started to loosen its grip on a long-held tension. By the 5th day, I was no longer checking my phone as often. The silence from my family didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like relief. No one asking me to fix anything. No one framing their demands as concern. I wasn't being erased in small ways. I was simply outside the frame. And for once, it was by choice. I reread the journal entry I'd written on the second night. It was short, just one line. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because they never asked if I was staying for myself. That line held me for a while. I let it echo in my chest until the bitterness drained out of it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. On the 6th day, a message came from Noelle, just a photo. It was the wedding venue, empty, lights still strung up, chairs half stacked. A caption below, quietest wedding I've ever seen. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. I knew the ripple effect. Once the funding collapsed, everything else followed. And yet, no one had reached out. Not Lauren, not my mother, not even a cousin trying to play peacekeeper. They were all busy rewriting the story, one where I was the villain, the unstable one, the jealous sister who had ruined the perfect day. I used to worry about that, about what people would think. But now, I understood something deeper. People cling to the version of you that makes them feel least responsible. And when you stop playing that role, they don't thank you. They resent the silence. That night, I sat on the balcony again. It had rained earlier, and the scent of wet pavement still lingered. I poured myself a small glass of wine and opened the book I'd been carrying around for months. I didn't read it. I just held it open in my lap and let the quiet settle. Across the courtyard, someone turned on fairy lights, casting soft gold into the dusk. A woman in a white sweater sat alone at a table with a slice of cake. She didn't look sad, just content. It struck me that peace doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it just looks like no one needing anything from you. I started packing the next morning, slowly, methodically, not because I was eager to leave, but because I was ready. I folded each shirt like it mattered. I placed my shoes in the side compartment, zipped everything shut, and sat on the edge of the bed for a full minute before standing. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel strong. I felt clear, like I had found the shape of myself again after years of being resized to fit someone else's expectations. On the drive back to Atlanta, I didn't rehearse any conversations. I didn't draft any responses in my head. I just drove. The trees blurred by like watercolors, and the sky stayed soft and open the entire way. I arrived home just after noon. The house smelled faintly of lemon and fresh air. My housekeeper had opened the windows. Bless her. I stood in the foyer for a while, keys still in hand, before finally walking through. Nothing had changed, but everything felt different, and I dropped my suitcase by the stairs and went straight to the kitchen, made tea, sat down, no phone, no music, just the sound of the kettle clicking off and the creak of the chair as I leaned back. That afternoon, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I wasn't sure what I was going to write, but I knew I needed to, not for closure, for clarity. The first sentence came easily. I was not the villain in their story. I just stopped being the unpaid stage crew, and from there, the rest unfolded. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't payback. It was a record, a quiet archive of what happens when the one holding everything together finally lets go. I didn't share it. I didn't post it. I didn't even print it. I just wrote it. And when I finished, I closed the laptop and took a deep breath, not to calm down, but to mark the moment, the before and the after, not for them, for me. I didn't announce my return to anyone. There was no grand statement, no post about healing, no casual back-in-town message to the family group chat. I just lived. I opened my windows each morning, made my tea, responded to work emails, and watered the plants I had almost let die earlier that month. They were hanging on, surprisingly, a little bent, a little discolored, but still upright. I related to that more than I expected. The first person to reach out again was not Lauren. It was my Aunt Nadine. She called on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of slow midweek moment when the world is just humming along, pretending nothing ever happened. I didn't answer the first time, but when she called again a few hours later, I picked up. Her voice came through steady, familiar. "Hey, baby," she said, "just checking in. No agenda, just love." I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes for a moment. "Thanks," I said. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't try to fix anything. She just said, "You know, sometimes not saying anything is the only way people learn how loud they've been." I didn't respond, but I held on to that line longer than I expected to. Later that week, I ran into an old colleague at the grocery store. Her name was Valerie. We hadn't seen each other since the firm's restructuring. We used to sit across from each other in finance meetings, trading eye rolls behind polished professionalism. She asked how I'd been. I told her I'd taken some time off. She smiled, then tilted her head. "You look good, like clear. That's rare these days." I thanked her and meant it. It was the first compliment that didn't feel like it came with an expectation attached. By Friday, I found myself returning to projects I had left untouched for months. I opened the presentation I had once pitched to a small client in Tennessee and found myself revising it, not because I had to, because I wanted to. The numbers still made sense. The vision still held up, but I saw things I hadn't seen before, places where I had over-explained, added extra slides to convince people of my value. I deleted those, not because the data changed, because I no longer needed to justify the space I took up in. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. The envelope said Lauren in lowercase, curved handwriting I recognized from our childhood chore lists, taped to the fridge. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the edge of my desk and let it sit there for 3 days. When I finally opened it, it was only 2 paragraphs. The first was full of reasons, her version of what went wrong, a list of things she was juggling, family pressure, social image, 1,000 little stresses that somehow, in her mind, explained why she'd excluded me. The second paragraph was shorter. It said, "I know I made it about me, but you've always been the one who holds things together. I guess I assumed you'd still show up." And I read that line 3 times, then folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. I didn't need an apology written for her conscience. I needed an acknowledgement of who I had been and what she had done with that loyalty. But I wasn't angry, just clear. She hadn't written because she missed me. She'd written because she finally felt the absence. That wasn't reconciliation. That was discomfort. That Saturday, I met Noelle for brunch. She waved at me from the patio, already sipping her iced latte. "You look different," she said as I sat down. In a good way. I nodded. "I feel light, not happy, just unburdened." She raised her glass and smiled. "That's better than happy." We talked about everything and nothing. At some point, she leaned in and asked, "So, what happens now?" I thought for a second, then answered honestly. "Now I live without trying to earn space I already own." The sun filtered through the overhead awning, soft and gold, and I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't rehearsing comebacks or trying to preempt someone else's version of the story. I was just sitting across from someone who saw me. No performance, no debt, just presence. That was my quiet return, not dramatic, not loud. A few days after brunch with Noelle, I got another call. This time it was my mother. Her number lit up around dinner time. I didn't pick up, not because I was avoiding her, but because I already knew what she would say, something carefully measured, emotionally restrained, and completely misdirected. I let it ring, then waited for the voicemail. Her voice was calm, practiced. "Hi, sweetheart. Just wanted to check in. I know things got a little tense, but I hope you're finding your footing. Your sister's been going through a lot. As you know, maybe when things settle, we can all talk." That last line told me everything. There was no apology in her tone, just suggestion, no accountability, only expectation. I deleted the message without replaying it. Later that night, I scrolled through Instagram out of idle habit. Lauren had posted a photo from what looked like a private brunch. She wore a pastel dress and smiled gently beside Marshall, who looked vaguely exhausted. The caption read, "Some things fall apart, so better things can come together." No mention of me, no tag, no trace. I closed the app. I didn't feel anger, just confirmation. People will perform clarity long before they actually achieve it. That weekend, I took a walk through my neighborhood, something I used to do often, but had stopped when everything felt too loud inside my head. It was early evening, the kind of dusk that makes the trees look older than they are and the sidewalks warmer than usual. I passed by a couple of neighbors tending their yard. One waved. I waved back. That simple exchange made me realize how much of my life had been swallowed by trying to belong in spaces where I was only tolerated. There's something sacred in being seen by people who don't expect anything from you. The next day, I reopened the letter from Lauren, not because I planned to respond, but because I wanted to look at her words one more time without the noise. This time, I noticed what she didn't say. No mention of how much I had paid, no recognition of how she had benefited, just a vague sense of regret cloaked in shared history, a nostalgia for a closeness she had already chosen to discard. That's when I knew I wasn't waiting for a reconciliation. I was grieving a pattern, one where I showed up even after being erased, one where being dependable meant being disposable. I didn't cry. I didn't journal. I just stood up, took the letter to the kitchen, and placed it in the shredder. The whir of the blades was brief, final. I exhaled slowly, then returned to the living room and lit the candle on the windowsill. Lavender and clove. It smelled like evening, like leaving something behind. And the next week, I got an unexpected email from a former client. He said he'd been referred by someone who remembered my work from over a year ago. "I heard you might be taking on projects again. Would love to talk." I stared at the screen for a while, then smiled, not because it felt like validation, but because it felt like alignment. I replied, short and direct, "Let's talk next Tuesday, noon." He confirmed within minutes. I added it to my calendar with the kind of ease that only comes when you're no longer carrying someone else's weight. That same evening, I passed the mirror in the hallway and stopped. I looked the same, but something about the way I stood felt steadier, not proud, just grounded, like I'd finally stopped shrinking in places that required me to disappear in order to be loved. The shift wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It showed up in small moments. The way I declined a last-minute request from a cousin without over-explaining. The way I paused before responding to texts, asking myself if I actually wanted to engage. The way I started making weekend plans that didn't require permission or performance. Lauren never called again. Not directly, but she sent a message through Aunt Nadine. "She still thinks it was about the money," Nadine said, relaying it gently over tea. I smiled and shook my head. It wasn't about the money. It was about being removed from something I built, quietly, faithfully, entirely. Nadine didn't argue. She just nodded, then reached for a cookie. "Some people only learn through silence," she said, "and some never do." We sat in that truth for a long time, no rush to fill the air. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I had already given it to myself. It's been 6 months since the wedding that never was. No one ever used that phrase aloud, but that's what it became, a gathering without a center, a production that fell apart when the invisible scaffolding me was removed. In that time, I haven't spoken to Lauren. I haven't seen my mother. There have been a few soft nudges from relatives trying to play neutral, hoping I'll bend first, but I haven't, not out of pride, out of clarity. I spent years making myself small enough to keep the peace, only to realize the peace was built on me disappearing. My life now is quieter, not empty, just quieter. I see Noelle once a week. We walk or sit on her porch with coffee. I've taken on 2 consulting clients, both of whom came through referrals, and both of whom respect my time. I started baking again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. Banana bread, lemon bars, even a ridiculous attempt at croissants that took 2 full days and still came out crooked. But I laughed. I laughed more than I had in years. Not because it was funny, because it was mine. The other night, I hosted a small dinner, just 5 people, no occasion, no speeches, just music, food, and presents. One of them brought wine, another brought a pie, and someone played an old jazz record that crackled like memory. At one point, as we were clearing plates, I looked around the table and thought, this is what love feels like when it doesn't cost your sense of self. Sometimes I wonder what they say about me now, if I'm the cautionary tale, if I'm the selfish one, the one who abandoned her family during a stressful time. But I don't let the wondering linger, because I know the truth. I didn't walk away to punish anyone. I walked away to find myself intact, and I found her, not in the mirror, but in the moments I no longer second guess, in the mornings I no longer dread, in the way my silence now feels like strength, not exile. Recently, I opened the old shared photo folder Lauren created for the wedding planning process. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Habit. The images were all still there. Venue mock-ups, flower arrangements, dress fittings. Most had no trace of me. But then I saw one. It was from a tasting session. I was sitting at the corner of the table, mid-laugh, holding a spoon and pointing it at the camera. I didn't remember the moment, but I looked happy. Not fake happy, just there, fully there. And for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt gratitude. Even then, even in the middle of being used, there were slivers of joy, and I had made space for them. That, to me, is power. They say grief isn't always about loss. Sometimes it's about what never fully existed. I grieved the family I thought I was part of, the one I kept showing up for, the one I imagined would someday see me, thank me, protect me the way I protected them. But they didn't, and they may never. That's their journey now, not mine. So no, I didn't ruin my sister's wedding. I didn't cause chaos. I didn't yell or fight or expose anyone. I simply stepped back and let the truth collapse under its own weight. I didn't pull any strings. I just stopped holding them together. And if silence felt like an earthquake, that says more about the foundation than it does about me. I still remember the subject line of her email. I remember the exact words, "Don't come to my wedding. Watch it on Livestream." Okay, it wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a decision, one I honored, and in doing so, I made a new decision of my own, not to return, not to explain, just to live fully, without apology. And now, months later, when people ask why I wasn't at the wedding, I give them the same answer every time. I say, I funded the illusion. I just didn't pay to watch it fall apart. Because at some point, you stop performing loyalty. You stop waiting to be seen. You stop earning love that should have been unconditional. And instead, you stand up, step outside the frame, and start asking the only question that matters now. Have you ever walked away from a role they wouldn't stop casting you in and found yourself in the quiet instead?